Chapter 5. Hiram, king of Tyre, had always been a friend of David. When he heard that Solomon was king in place of his father, he sent ambassadors to him. Then Solomon sent to Hiram the following message. You know that David, my father, had many wars against the nations around him. Therefore, he was never able to build a temple dedicated to the Lord his God until he made him defeat all his enemies. But now, the Lord has given me peace on all the borders. I have no enemies, and there is no danger of attacks. God promised the following to David, my father. Your son, whom I will put as king after you, he will build a temple for me. Therefore, I have decided to build a temple for the worship of my God, the Lord. For this, order cedars from Lebanon to be cut for me. My workmen will work together with yours, and I will pay your workmen as much as you want. As you know, among my people there is no one who knows how to cut trees as well as your people of the city of Sidon. When he received the message of Solomon, King Hiram was very glad and said, Praised be today the Lord who gave to David a son full of wisdom to stand in his place as king of that great nation. Then he sent to say to Solomon the following, I received your message, and I will fulfill your request. I will provide the cedars and the pines. My workmen will bring the logs down from the heights of the Lebanon mountains to the sea and will make rafts with them. Then they will take them along the coast to the place that you choose. There my workmen will unfasten the logs, and your workmen will take charge of them. And I would like you to provide food for my workmen. And thus Hiram supplied to Solomon all the cedar wood and pine that he asked. In each year Solomon supplied to Hiram 2,000 tons of wheat and 400,000 liters of pure olive oil to feed his men. The Lord God fulfilled his promise and gave wisdom to Solomon. There was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and they made an agreement with each other. King Solomon summoned throughout Israel a group of 30,000 forced laborers and put Adoniram as chief over them. Solomon divided these laborers into 3 groups of 10,000 men. Each group spent 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Solomon also sent to the hill country 80,000 men in order to cut stones and 70,000 men to carry them. He appointed 3,300 overseers to direct their work. Obeying the orders of King Solomon, they cut large stones of good quality for the foundations of the temple. The workmen of Solomon and of Hiram and some men of the city of Byblos prepared the stones and the wood for the construction of the temple. Chapter 6. 480 years after the people of Israel had come out of Egypt in the 4th year of the reign of Solomon in Israel, in the month of Ziv. The 2nd month Solomon began to build the temple. The temple measured 27 meters in length by 9 in width, by 13.5 in height. The entrance hall measured 4.5 meters in length by 9 in width, that is, the same width as the sanctuary. The walls of the temple had windows that were narrower on the outside than on the inside. Leaning on the sides and the back of the temple, Solomon built 3 stories of rooms, each story measuring 2 meters and 20 centimeters in height. The rooms of the lower floor had 2 meters and 20 in width. Those of the middle floor had 2 meters and 70 in width, and those of the upper floor 3 meters and 10 in width. On each floor, the walls of the temple were thinner than those of the floor below. Thus the rooms rested on the walls, preventing the beams from going into these walls. The temple was built with stones that had been prepared at the quarries so that during the construction the noise of hammers, axes, or any other tool was not heard. The entrance to the rooms of the ground floor was on the south side of the temple, and there were stairs to go up to the 2nd and to the 3rd floors. And so King Solomon finished the construction of the temple, putting a ceiling made of beams and boards of cedar. Solomon built 3 stories of rooms leaning on the walls of the temple and joined with them by means of beams of cedar. Each story measured 2 meters and 20 centimeters in height. The Lord God said to Solomon, If you obey all my laws and commandments, I will do for you what I promised to give to your father. I will live among my people of Israel in this temple that you are building, and I will never abandon them. And so Solomon finished the construction of the temple. The walls of the temple were lined inside with boards of cedar, from the floor to the ceiling, and the floor was made of pine. At the back of the temple was built an inner room which was called the Most Holy Place. It measured 9 meters in length, and was separated by a division made of boards of cedar that went from the floor to the ceiling. The holy place, which was in front of the most holy place, was 18 meters in length. The lining of cedar was decorated with carvings in the shape of gourds and flowers. All the inside of the room was covered with cedar, so that the stones of the walls would not be showing. As already said, at the back of the temple was made a room, the most holy place, for the Ark of the Covenant of God to be placed in it. This room measured 9 meters in length, by 9 in width, by 9 in height, and was all covered with pure gold. The altar was covered with boards of cedar. The inside of the temple was covered with gold, and at the entrance of the most holy place were placed chains of gold. This room also was covered with gold. The whole temple inside, and also the altar of the most holy place, were covered with gold. 2 cherubim of wood of olive tree were made, which were placed in the most holy place. Each of them measured 4 meters and 40 in height. The 2 cherubim had the same size and the same form. Each one had 2 wings, and each wing measured 2 meters and 25 centimeters in length. Thus, the distance from the tip of one wing to the other was 4.5 meters. The 2 cherubim were placed in the most holy place. They were with wings outstretched in such a way that the wing of one touched one wall, and the wing of the other touched the other wall. And in the middle of the room, the wing of one touched the wing of the other. The 2 cherubim were overlaid with gold. The walls of the holy place and of the most holy place were all decorated with carved figures representing cherubim, palm trees, and flowers. Even the floor of the 2 divisions was covered with gold. The entrance of the most holy place was placed a double door made of wood of olive tree. At the top, the doorposts formed a pointed arch. The doors were decorated with carved figures representing cherubim, palm trees, and flowers. The doors, the cherubim, and the palm trees were overlaid with gold. For the entrance of the holy place were made rectangular door frames of wood of olive tree. There were 2 doors of 2 leaves that were made of pine and decorated with carved figures of cherubim, palm trees, and flowers, which also were overlaid with gold. In front of the temple was built an inner courtyard, closed by walls that had 1 row of beams of cedar for every 3 rows of stones. The foundations of the temple were laid in the month of Ziv, the 2nd month, in the 4th year of the reign of Solomon. In the 11th year of the reign of Solomon, in the 8th month, the month of Bul. The temple was completely finished, exactly as had been planned. Solomon took 7 years to build it. Chapter 7. Solomon also built his palace and took 13 years to finish it. The hall of the forest of Lebanon measured 44 meters in length by 22 in width, by 13.5 in height. It had 3 rows of cedar columns, with 15 columns in each row, with cedar beams that rested on them. The roof was of cedar, extending to the storerooms, which were supported by the columns. On the walls on each side, there were 3 rows of windows. All the doors and all the windows were square, and the 3 rows of windows on each wall were exactly opposite the rows of windows of the wall on the other side. The hall of the columns measured 22 meters in length by 13.5 in width. It had a porch that was covered and supported by columns. The throne room, also called the Hall of Judgment, where Solomon judged the matters, was lined with cedar from the floor to the beams. In another courtyard, behind the throne room, was the house where Solomon lived. The construction was of the same style as the others. Solomon also made a house of the same type for his wife, the daughter of the king of Egypt. All these constructions, and also the great courtyard, were made of chosen stones, from the foundations to the edge of the roof. The stones were prepared in the quarry and cut to measure, with the inside and outside sides cut with saws. The foundations were made with large stones prepared in the quarry. Some were 3.5 meters in length, and others 4.5 meters in length. On top of them were placed expensive stones, cut to measure, and beams of cedar. The courtyard of the palace, the inner courtyard of the temple, and the entrance hall of the temple had walls made with 1 row of cedar beams for every 3 rows of cut stones. King Solomon sent for a man called Hiram, an artisan who lived in the city of Tyre and who was a specialist in works of bronze. His father, who had already died, was from Tyre and had also been an artisan specialized in bronze. His mother was from the tribe of Naphtali. Hiram was an intelligent and capable artisan. He accepted the invitation of Solomon and took charge of all the work in bronze. Hiram cast 2 columns of bronze, each 8 meters in height and 1 meter 70 in diameter, and placed them at the entrance of the temple. He also made 2 capitals for the columns, each 2 meters and 20 in height, to be placed at the top of the columns. The top of each column was decorated with a design of interlaced chains and 2 rows of pomegranates made of bronze. The capitals of the columns had the form of lilies, measured 1 meter and 80 in height, and were placed on a round part that was above the design of chains. On each capital of column, there were 200 pomegranates of bronze placed in 2 rows. Hiram placed these 2 columns of bronze in front of the entrance of the temple. The one that was on the south side was called Yakin, and the one that was on the north side was called Boaz. The capitals of the columns in the form of lilies, made of bronze, were on the top of the columns, and thus the work of the columns was finished. Hiram made a round tank of bronze with 2 meters and 20 in depth, 4 meters and 40 in diameter, and 13 meters and 20 in circumference. Around the outer edge of the tank there were 2 rows of gourds of bronze that had been cast all in one piece with the tank. The tank was set upon the backs of 12 bulls of bronze that faced outward. 3 faced north, 3 faced west, 3 faced south, and 3 faced east. The thickness of the walls of the tank was 4 fingers. Its edge was like the edge of a cup, curving outward like the petals of a lily. The capacity of the tank was about 40,000 liters. Hiram also made 10 stands of bronze. Each measured 1 meter and 80 in length, 1 meter and 80 in width, and 1 meter and 30 in height. They were made of square panels that were mounted in frames. On these panels there were figures of lions, bulls, and cherubim. And on the frames above and below the lions and the bulls, there were designs of spirals in relief. Each stand had 4 wheels of bronze with axles of bronze. On the 4 corners there were supports of bronze for a basin. The supports were decorated with figures of spirals in relief. On the top there was a round frame for the basin. This frame extended 45 centimeters upward from the top of the stand and 18 centimeters downward into it. Around it there were carvings. The wheels were 67 centimeters in height. They were under the panels, and the axles were made in one piece with the stands. The wheels were like the wheels of a chariot. Their axles, rims, spokes, and their hubs were all of bronze. There were 4 supports on the corners under each stand, which were made in one piece with the stand. There was a band of 22 centimeters around the top of each stand. Its supports and the panels were made in one piece with the stand. The supports and the panels were decorated with figures of cherubim, lions, and palm trees, which covered all the space there was, and around these figures there were designs in spiral. Thus then the stands were made. All of them were alike, having the same size and shape. Hiram also made 10 basins of bronze, 1 for each stand. Each basin had 1 meter and 80 in diameter, and its capacity was about 830 liters. He placed 5 stands on the south side of the temple, and the other 5 on the north side. The tank he placed in the southeast corner. Hiram also made cauldrons, shovels, and basins. And thus he finished all the work ordered by King Solomon for the temple of the Lord. This is the list of what he made. 2 columns, 2 capitals in the form of bowls that were on the top of the columns, designs of interlaced chains for each capital. 400 pomegranates of bronze in 2 rows of 100 around. The design of each capital 10 stands, 10 basins, 1 tank, 12 bowls that supported the tank, cauldrons, shovels, and basins. All the objects destined for the temple that Hiram made for King Solomon were of polished bronze. The king ordered that all be made in the foundry between Sukkot and Zarethan in the valley of the Jordan River. Solomon did not order these objects of bronze to be weighed, because they were many, and therefore their weight was never calculated. Solomon also ordered to be made for the temple the following objects of gold: the altar, the table for the loaves offered to God, the 10 lampstands that were in front of the most holy place, 5 on the south side and 5 on the north side, the flowers, the lamps and the tongs, the cups, the wick trimmers, the basins, the dishes for incense and the censers, the hinges for the doors of the most holy place, and for the doors of the temple that led outside. All these objects were made of gold. When King Solomon finished all the work of the temple, he placed in the treasury room of the temple all the things that David, his father, had set apart for the Lord God, that is, the silver, the gold, and other objects.